Hello, and welcome to a conversation with Rad. And I am your host, Radcliffe. And today we're diving into some captivating discussion. We hope every episode will bring you fresh insight and inspiring stories and candid conversation. In today's conversation, we'll be diving into some lifelong friendship, real journeys, actions that shape our lives, and possible down memory lane. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to my guest today. Today, my guest is Frank Hain. Throughout this conversation, we'll be referring to him as Frank. Hey, Frank, welcome.
Hey, Ryan.
You know, Frank was one of the original member of the BAR, the Black Alumni Reunion Review Group, that kind of stemmed from, our days back in Buffalo. So Frank, again, one of the original members, but has been in Buffalo for some time. So I'm going to let Frank talk about that. But, just to get started, Frank, let's tell our audience where you're calling in from today.
I'm calling from Wesley Chapel, Florida, just north of Tampa, Florida.
Mm. The sunny state.
Yes, sir.
I'm hoping you can send some this side because I'm in New York and we don't get that type of weather down here. So first off, you know, let's share with our audience a little bit about yourself, right? And probably a few fun facts, about your journey from, and again, this is from Buff, to now.
Okay.
A few fun facts, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn and went to Buffalo to go to college in
Hold
19.
on. Did you say you were born and raised in Brooklyn? That country they
Yes.
call it Brooklyn, because Brooklyn itself is like a country.
Yeah. Born and raised in Brooklyn, not New York City, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
Lived in Brooklyn, first 18 years of my life. Well, you know what? I take that back. There was a short time, about 3 year period of time, I lived in Jamaica. I lived in Jamaica from 73 to 76. And then when I came back to the States, I lived in Manhattan for 1 year. And then 76, 77, went back to Brooklyn and stayed in Brooklyn till 85. And then I went to Buffalo to go to school. Once I got to Buffalo, I made the choice not to leave. And I got an apartment and remained up there till about 89, May of 89.
Nice. So Brooklyn seemed like a strong part of your being because that's where you're born. You
Yes.
you left and came back there.
Today's Brooklyn is not my home, but I'm proud to be born and raised in Brooklyn. And the Brooklyn I know is gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. The
Well,
Brooklyn I know is gone.
things do change, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where we are. Things do change, whether it's for the good or the bad. It's evolution, right? So Brooklyn has evolved into something that for some people, it may not be recognizable, but it is still Brooklyn, the country Brooklyn.
Yeah. I
So,
go visit. I go visit every now and then, but when I get there, I can't wait to leave.
so do you still have family ties there in Brooklyn?
Yeah, my brother's still there. My brother lives in Bed-Stuy, and I have a cousin who lives in Brooklyn. My grandmother passed about a year ago. So up until about a year ago, my grandmother was still in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Condolences, because
And she lived a
again,
good life. She was 99. She was
99.
99.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she lived a good life, a long life, I should say.
A long life,
Yeah.
She's seen a lot. She has seen a lot.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And she was very influential to me growing up. She was a good example of what perseverance can do for you and hard work. And I definitely got some traits from her.
So you mentioned you moved from, you came back to Brooklyn, and then you left there in 85, I think you
Yeah.
said, and went up to
85.
Buffalo. So
Yes.
give me a little bit let's touch on Buffalo. What was in Buffalo for you? Why'd you went to Buffalo?
Okay. When I my last year of high school, I my senior year in high school, I was in a program that taught us about working in a television studio,
Okay.
and I was learning a trade, and I was also being prepped to take the FCC exam for FCC license.
Okay.
And
And that's for radio and television, right? I'm
right,
assuming.
that's for the radio and television field, and I don't think that license has the value today that it did back in the '80s. But we were being told that you get that license, that's your foot in the door to a job at the networks or a radio station. And so the high school program that I was involved in my senior year prepped the students to learn the material for that test and take that test out of high school, which was not normal. That's the type of thing that maybe somebody in college would do. But this high school program, prepared you for that. So in my senior year of high school, I was weighing the options of going to work or going to college. Intuitively, I decided to go to college.
Okay.
The one thing about um, my situation at that time, I was making a lot of decisions for myself. Nobody was really guiding me. I was guiding myself as a young man. I applied to 3 colleges. And I should say I applied to several colleges, and 3 accepted me. All
Okay.
soon.
And so you chose
I
Buffalo.
chose I chose Buffalo because it was the furthest from New York. So that was my decision
So
process.
so let's harp on that just for a little bit. You were trying to get away from the chaotic scene in Brooklyn, and
I
you
wanted a change of scenery. I wanted to travel, to be the furthest from Brooklyn, from what I knew, was a type of traveling, learning someplace new. If you live in New York and you go to New Jersey, you're not going to experience much new because New Jersey and New York is next to each other.
yes.
But in my mind, I guess the logic was, the further away you go, chances are things are going to be different than what you know. And you can leave behind what you want to leave behind and, embrace something new.
Yeah, yeah.
And so out of the 3 schools that accepted me, Buffalo was the furthest, and that was why I chose Buffalo.
Well, I
And
must say, I'm sorry. I must say, I'm glad you chose Buffalo, because if you did not choose Buffalo, we wouldn't be having this. I don't think we'd be having this conversation, and we're going to dive more into some of the other friendships you've made in Buffalo. But I'm glad you chose Buffalo.
yeah, me too. Um, I didn't know it then, but the people I met there, the people I chose to be around and be friends with, are my friends today. They're my closest friends today. Lifelong friends I was able to get by being in Buffalo in the late '80s.
That is a
So
bond. That is
I'm very, very grateful for that.
so. It's like I'm going to say 30 years, but it must be more than 30, close to 40 for you guys. But that's a
Yeah.
lifelong friendship, a bond, a brotherhood kind of thing. And you may throw some sisters in there, so it's just cumulative. It's just one of those bonds that build over time. After knowing people for so
July of this year will be 40 years.
wow, that is amazing. And I'm just gonna do a shameless little plug, because I believe there are plans for a reunion in Buffalo for some of the fellas who've been there for those 40 years and you're still friends with, brothers with. The word friends just mean, it could be referred to a colleague or whatever it is, but this is a brotherhood from what I've seen with some of you guys.
Yeah, I agree. But I choose to use the word friend carefully. Not everybody's my friend. I have a lot of associates. I know this guy, I know of that guy. But if I call you my friend, it's like the word love. I don't use that word lightly either.
Yes.
If I tell somebody I love them, I put some thought into choosing that word to say, hey man, I love you.
Yeah.
It is it is meaningful.
Yes, definitely. There are certain words that are chosen carefully. And again, as you said, friends are not thrown out there loosely, and brotherhood could have a lot of different connotations to it. But in this sense, brotherhood is just, what it is. It's somebody I can look at and call my brother. Somebody I can look and say, hey, this is a person I can count on, a friend I can count on. So I'm kind of glad, glad to hear that. Anything else you want to add? I mean, yes, Buffalo. Yeah.
So, I did leave Buffalo before graduating, and I left with the intent of continuing school in New York City.
Mhm.
And my preferred plans didn't happen. I had wanted to transfer to a 4-year school.
Yes.
I was thinking of Hunter College. But when I went through the application process, I didn't realize that my cum was below a 2.20. I had a 1.9. So while I was in Buffalo, my cum was a 2.3 because I had E repeater class.
Yes.
But I didn't know that when you transfer, the failing class stay with your transcript. And that failing class brought my cum below a 2.0. So I couldn't transfer to a 4-year school, which means I couldn't transfer 64 credits,
Yeah.
half of what you need. So I had to go back to a 2-year school,
Bring that up.
and I was only able to transfer 32 credits out of the 93 that I had acquired in Buffalo. So that was a setback.
You were that close to finishing, because I think you need what, 110 or
I think it's like
120,
121.
121, I believe.
But the problem that I had was I uh, I delayed in picking a major, and in my junior year I was forced to pick a major,
Okay.
and that was I don't want to say I regret the choices I made. I chose to be a physics major,
Yes.
and I chose physics because I was interested in science and astronomy, but I didn't have the math and science background for physics,
Okay.
and I didn't realize that until I started taking some of those physics classes.
You needed those.
And because I was a junior, I was taking freshman physics courses. And because I was a junior,
Yeah.
2 years behind the program, I was taking more in the same semester than I could handle
Just to catch up.
just to catch up. Because my first 2 years, I probably took care of all my electives. So now all that's left is my core major courses. And if I chose physics and I'm a junior taking freshman courses, then in my 4th year, I'm taking a lot of sophomore physics courses together. And I was not able to handle that. So in hindsight, I should have chosen a major that wasn't as demanding. And the ironic thing is, I feel like I have the ability to be a teacher. And Buffalo was a teaching school. And
Teaching.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I left. I said, wait a minute, if I had somebody advising me, or if I had thought about this a little bit more, instead of being hasty and making a decision for a major that even though I had an interest in it,
Yeah.
I wasn't ready for it. I could have chose something that I could handle more, and I probably could have became a teacher.
Yeah.
Because Buffalo was a teaching school. I understand,
Definitely.
it.
Definitely was.
And I missed the boat there. But again, when I went back to New York, went to Brooklyn, and I went to New York City Tech, that's where I met my wife. So had I not made the moves that I made, I wouldn't have ended up with this woman and the children that we grew together.
Yeah.
So the story has a happy ending, but it definitely could have went a different way. And who's to say that would have been a better way?
Definitely. You're right. Sometimes we make some decisions and, we question them, but sometimes the road, the road to certain, distance is not always the straight road, right? You
Yeah.
may take a detour here or there and you will get there, but you're going to question some of those side roads that you've taken. Why was it so long? Or, you
I
know,
took the scenic route.
you took the scenic route, you stop to smell the roses,
Yeah.
you know,
I lived life.
so I was going to come back to this later, but I'm going to jump into it now, right?
Okay.
Because you said you chose yet you were forced into your major in your junior year because you did not make that choice earlier on, right? So
Right.
what I'm going to jump into is, I wonder. I wonder if if the Forest Avenue apartment had anything to do with that delay in in you selecting your major. Because let me just throw this out there for a little bit, because Forest was where a lot of the fellas that we call brother today kind of met up. There was a house slash an apartment that was there, and you guys all lived in that. Sometime, you know um you guys lived in there and stuff like that. And you know back in the days, folks were known to party, right? So I'm wondering if maybe this 40 ounce didn't allow me to get up off the couch and go to class and choose my major, or I was having so much fun. And I'm wondering, you want to touch on that a little bit, or am I
Yeah.
misconstrued in that a little
No,
bit?
no, no. Listen, you touched on some facts. Definitely a big part of my college experience was my social life. And, not living in your parents' home, being on your own, you know, young adults feel like they know everything. And, a lot of freedoms is brand new to you. You can do what you want. You start having a more active sexual life, and you start drinking and whatever else you decide to try, and you're grown. You're grown, and school is not fun. Some people, they are driven enough to know that the objective is to graduate, and then they put sufficient energy into that. They study when they're supposed to study. They don't miss class. They have everything figured out, and those folks, they get rewarded for their sacrifices and their hard work.
Yeah.
Then you have other people like me that's just, you're there, you're doing what you think is right, and then sometimes the understanding is not clear
Yeah.
that you know you need to do this, this, and this. And let me share one more thing. So when I was in high school, I've always been a smart person.
Yes.
At least I think so. And that actually hurt me because I was able to do well in high school with minimal effort. I
Okay.
didn't have to do a lot of reading, a lot of studying. I would pay attention, I would do
Mhm.
my homework, and I would do well on the tests. But when you go to college, the level of the curriculum, the amount of reading you have to do, the vocabulary,
Takes a lot
the
more than.
concepts,
Yes.
it takes a lot more.
And
So,
sorry, and one of the thing as well is, right, because in college, you don't there's no one on your back. You don't have to
right.
go to class. You don't have to, as long as you do your work, right? And the difference is, with high school, your parents or somebody, big brother or big sister,
Mhm.
will say, "Hey,
Or
get up and go to class.
yeah, or
Do your homework."
the school will let your family know. We haven't seen them in 2 weeks. What's going on. So but what I was trying to say was that being smart in high school hurt me because I had poor habits and I carried those poor habits to college. At college, kicked my butt, and I had a hard time. And then just to add to that, I think the first time I ever read a book complete from cover to cover was in college. I would read articles or things that interest me, when I was in high school, but to actually pick up a book and read a 200 or 300 page book from cover to cover, the first time I did that was in college, and that was the autobiography of Malcolm X. That is the first book that I ever, on my own, nobody forced me to read it. I wanted to read
Was
it.
that a read for a class, or just you?
No, I forgot how I got my hands on that book, but I think my first year of college, I started to become more and more interested in Black history and Black studies, and you know, trying to know more about the struggles of Black people in America. And somehow I got that book, and probably was recommended to me as a good book. I started to read it, and I was very intrigued by it. It kept my interest to finish it, but that that's just an example of, I guess, how delayed my learning was. To have to wait till you get to college to read your first book from cover to cover.
Yeah.
In comparison, like my daughter, she was reading like a whole bunch of books at 13, you know, like 900-page books, Twilight series and
Yeah.
all these different, type of books. So her reading, I look at that and I go, wow, when I was your age, I wasn't reading nothing, but still, I found myself to be a smart person. And my interest was in science. And I wanted to try going that route, try being a physics major.
Yeah.
But I just was not aware of how difficult of a choice that was until it was too late. I made the choice, I was in it, I was trying, but I did not have the background, the math background or the science background for it. And I didn't have the study habits, the good study habits that was required to tackle a subject like that.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of school.
So let's stay on school a little bit, because um, I know you met a lot of friends up there. We touched on that initially, or the Brotherhood and stuff like that. Who were some of the characters you met up there while you were there, and kind of how did you guys kind of got together?
Okay. Well, for my experience, it started in the summer of '85. I was able to be admitted to college and help pay for college through the Seek EOP program, and that program offered like a summer school where students would be able to take a couple of college classes in the summertime, get to learn the campus, and get a head start on being acclimated to living.
Kind of an introduction to
Yes, exactly. Because I'm pretty sure if you went to school for the first time in September, it's a shock. But if you were there from the summer and you got like 6 weeks to be on the campus and get to know people and sort of get one or two classes under your belt and get credit, you know, that was a benefit. So I went to that summer program and met a lot of people. Didn't necessarily gravitate to anybody in particular. But then when the semester started in the fall, my roommate was your brother, Trevor. I
Trevor's
was
your
telling
roommate.
right. So because I knew of Trevor, it was a welcoming news that I got to room with somebody that I'm kind of familiar with, somebody that comes from Brooklyn, like I come from Brooklyn, is Jamaican. My family is Jamaican. My mother's Jamaican. So that familiarity was really beneficial. And I knew of the other guys, but it seemed like Trevor was already close to those guys, Seth, Munsell. So I got to know Seth and Munsell better because of their association with Trevor. At least that's how I remember it. But
Okay.
again, I knew of Seth, I knew of Munsell, separate from Trevor. But the fact that me and Trevor was roommates, and then maybe Seth and Munsell was coming by, or we go see them, or we just clicked together.
But none of
And
those
then,
so those guys were in the summer program as well.
yeah, they were. And so was Danny, so was Tito.
Okay.
And again, I knew of everybody, but the closeness that we eventually got, it wasn't, well, at least for me, it wasn't automatic, instant.
So it wasn't an instant thing. Yeah.
Right. Not in that first summer program, but the bond developed, let's say the first semester, you know. And then by the end of the first year, we were all very close. So close that we planned to live together in our sophomore year.
Okay. So you guys were all if did you guys end up living together that or you
We
planned
did. The first house that we rented was at 43 Hawley Street.
Holly? Okay.
Rent was $100 each. It was a 4-bedroom house.
Oh, let's not just skip over those important because we're having this conversation in 2025, right?
Right.
And you're saying
In
rent was
1986, in
rent
the
was
summer of
$100.
1986, our landlord Phil, he he was renting out this shell of a home, and us college kids who didn't know better thought we was doing a good thing, and we agreed to $100 each. The house had like a one level, and it was 4 bedrooms in the house, It was one bathroom, I believe. Could have been two bathrooms. It could have been two bathrooms. But anyway, we each were responsible and obligated to a bedroom. So even though it was a one house, my agreement with Phil was to pay $100 for this bedroom. And I think it was the same for the rest. Everybody have to pay Phil $100 for their bedroom.
Oh, so the agreement wasn't it's $400 for rent. It was, hey, I'm going to be in this room. I'm paying you
Right.
$100.
I think I think that's how it went. I don't think we had to like come up with the rent all together. Like if Phil saw me, I gave him my 100 and I'm good. If I remember correctly. But we soon learned that that house was no joke because, Buffalo is cold in the winter. And I was in the house from June, July, August, no problem.
So it was warm. It was hot, basically.
Yeah, because it was hot in Buffalo. But come September, October, November, you start to understand this house ain't shit. I'm gonna tell you something. I had sunlight coming through my closet. So you know there was a hole in the wall somewhere. Because if you open my closet, I have sunlight in my closet.
So you were getting the drift of Lake Erie. You were getting
Oh man, no joke. No joke. Another thing about that damn house, it was I guess rodent infested.
whoa,
Because I had about three or four pairs of leather shoes, a pair of Clarks, pair of Travel Fox.
the great fox.
I had I wake up one morning and find all these nibbles on the edge of the shoe where you
Yeah,
stick
the
your foot
cheese
in.
bottom.
No, not even the bottom of the shoe, like the top edge, the leather part.
Oh,
All these little nibbles, and then my travel flocks. It had like cushion around the ankle. Some mouse bit out a whole section of that foam. Yo, I was vexed, man. I was vexed. This like $100 pair of shoes.
you know,
Fucking the mouse just ruined them.
at that time you were say 86, so you got them at 85, 86.
Yeah, man.
That's $100. It's a lot of money.
It is, man. It is. But at some point, I think we rebelled, and we decided to just leave that house and just leave Phil flat. And Phil tried to appease us by lowering the rent. Like I forget what number he came down to, but it was like, if you're willing to take $50, why the fuck was you charging us 100?
There's something wrong.
Yeah, but I think we had good cause to leave, and I forget what that was.
I think the
But
rats could have been,
it,
the causes.
that could have easily been it. It could have been the sunlight in my closet and how cold the damn place was. But we were definitely there at least 6 months because I think we spent Thanksgiving there.
Okay.
I remember a picture that I have of me, Seth, Danny, and I think Marcel, and we're praying over this table, bowing and giving grace for some food that we're having for Thanksgiving. So we were definitely there for Thanksgiving.
Okay.
The thing about my stay in Buffalo is that once I got there, I never left. So going away to college wasn't only just to get an education. It was like to find a place to live. Actually, once I got to Buffalo, I stayed
Okay.
until
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people did that because they weren't in a position, once you get that independent from going to college, you don't want to come back to certain things. So that becomes, that thing that pulls you there, that makes you want to stay. So I think a lot of people did that. So it's not just you. So I can understand that. So you met these guys, Monsell, Trevor, Danny, and stuff like that. Um,
Tito.
you know, you know, so you guys had your own interest and goal and stuff like that. You know, what's one of the common, ground that you know that kept you guys that brought you guys together? And because again, you can have blood brothers, right? And they all have different interests and stuff like that. What are some of the interests or things that bond you guys together? So that kept you guys together, brought you guys together, kind of thing.
That's a good question because I could easily come up with what was different about us. And it'd probably take some effort for me to put my finger on, well, what kept us together. Like, for instance, some of us smoke, some of us didn't smoke.
Yeah.
We all drank, and drinking was new to me. I didn't drink as a high school student, but when I got to college, and it was your peers are doing it, so you give it a shot, and then you like how you feel, so you do it again tomorrow.
Was that the 40 ounces, the old heat,
Yeah, the beers and the
cyanide, those
um
kind of thing?
yeah, and it was Southern Comfort. I think Seth introduced us to Southern Comfort, or he introduced me to it. Let me see what else. I mean, things like Hennessy has always been famous and popular, but Hennessy was the more expensive liquor, so you wouldn't have me drinking Hennessy, not at our income bracket. But Southern Comfort, you pull together and buy a bottle of that. You didn't need to drink much of it, and we refer to that as out the box juice, OTB, out the box. And eventually, Cisco came on the scene a couple of years later.
Cisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one is Cisco.
Cisco, I don't even know how to describe it other than it came in like a smaller bottle than most alcohol. And this thing was like 15 or 17% alcohol.
Oh, so it's potent.
And yeah, we called it liquid crack. This shit was no joke. You didn't have to drink a lot of it to be fucked up. But I remember that. Uh, Another difference that we had was, Munsell and I was into science.
It's okay.
I was into basketball. I spent a lot of my time playing basketball, and the other guys played as well, but not as frequently as I did. I
So
know
the
Trevor was into music, and I like music too, but I think Trevor was really into music more than the rest of us.
because Trev, and in previous conversations, I guess, we talked about Trev and he was on the radio station. I think
Right.
what was the radio station called?
BNY,
WBNY.
Buffalo, New York,
Yeah.
WBNY. I think so.
WBNY 93.1 or something like that, I
That
think.
sounds right.
Yeah,
That
so I
sounds
guess
right.
I can see the music
So
there.
there's another difference. I think Trevor and Seth were communication majors, so they were able to get their foot in the door and get a program on the radio station.
Okay.
So there was things that we had different that was unique. Like I said, some of us smoke, some don't smoke. Me and Munsell was into science. Seth and Trevor was communications major. I know Tito, he was initially not 100% a part of our group. I think he was with us, but then he had his own Spanish group and he was with them. But some point, maybe the living arrangements was he was living with Seth. So that brought him closer to our group.
So
I'm trying to think.
Was Tito more of the criminal justice, avenue, or
I don't even remember what major Tito was. I
because
don't even remember what major he was.
later that brother kind of, jumped into public service. So
Yeah,
as a public servant,
fighting crime.
fighting crime, keeping people like you and me safe,
Yeah, something like that.
keeping New York safe.
Yeah.
But that's good though, man. Even and again, as I preface it by saying, you guys had different, different goals and different things like that. You still were together, right? It's not like everybody was taking classes together. Few were taking few classes, but something kind of brought you guys back, back together. Um, so let's touch on this a little bit because last year, we lost one of our brothers, Tennyson, right? And God rest his soul, and keep watching over his family. But we lost Tennyson last year. And when did you meet Tennyson in Buffalo?
Met Tennyson in the summer program. He was also a part of that program.
It was in the summer program as well.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, okay.
So Tennyson is somebody who we knew, and we knew that he was Jamaican. We knew he was from Brooklyn. So instantly, there's a connection of some sort.
So that Brooklyn connection, it just seemed like it's prevalent in the group.
Yeah. Well, Seth is from Queens, and Danny's from Queens, and Tito's from Manhattan. So I don't think that
Yeah,
that was
Tito's uppity.
necessarily.
Tito's the uppity person. He's the one who live in the rich neighborhoods in Manhattan, kind of.
No, I didn't get that from Tito. I didn't get that from Tito. I know Tito's Spanish, and you know, You get around a group of people, and then the ones who can speak Spanish start speaking Spanish, and then you're like lost. So those people can gravitate together, and they share um, that cultural bond where they have the language. He also was spending time with our group, and again, I think after he started living with Seth, that's when he became closer to our group. And that's not to say that he was any less closer to his other group. A couple of names that come to mind is like Lewis,
Victor.
Victor. Okay. I'm thinking of one or two other people, but I don't have their names.
Okay.
So I know he had like two cliques that he was associated with.
He was dipping his toe in two different.
I think so. I think so. Truth be told, I might have given him a hard time in the beginning. So I didn't know where his allegiance was.
That's common of light skinned brothers. They like to, give people a hard. Oh, sorry. I'm on the one of them. So let me take that back a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But you know, I started with Tennyson, and I want to go back to
Oh, that's right. Tennyson.
Tennyson. Yeah,
So yeah, I think he was a part of the summer program again because he's Jamaican, because he's from Brooklyn, because we were in that program together, and you're just getting to know everybody. So everybody is equal. Tennyson separated himself, through his personality and some of the things he would say. And I don't have any particular memory of any particular thing, but Tennyson, he he stood out. He was different, and not good, not bad, just different. He wanted to volunteer and be working with public safety. And it's like, really? That's the enemy. But Tennyson was a good guy. And that's
but his work with public safety, right? And I think this is what made him stood out, quite a bit as well, right? So he was driving that van. I forgot, the service that they call that one, right? Where he would make sure, like in the evening or night, that
a safe escort.
safe escort and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
he took that to heart. He wanted to make sure that people were safe.
Right.
And that's part of his character, not just
Right.
because it was a job. That is Tennyson. He's gonna show you the way if he can. He's gonna help you wherever he can.
Like he had morals and he had a code and he had an idea of right versus wrong. And he chose the side of right.
Yes.
I can't say I disagree with him, but I definitely felt like he was different.
And different again is not bad, or it's just,
Right. It's
you know
not bad.
it's just something other than what because you kind of looking at yourself when you say different, right? So
Yeah. Well,
it's
I
something
mean,
that maybe you wouldn't have done it, but for him, that was either his call and something that he wanted to do and stuff like that.
right. And that's who the person he wanted to be. He was true to himself.
Yeah.
He was not phony. He chose a certain path that I don't know. I don't want to say nothing negative because there's nothing negative about the decisions he made. It's just that those were different than the decisions I made. If I'm gonna have a beer, I'm gonna go to a party, I'm gonna try to mess with a girl. He might have been on something else.
Yeah, I'll catch you later. I got to make sure that people are safe
Yeah,
and stuff like that. Yeah, that was part of
but
who he
I
was.
tell you what though, no matter what the differences were, there was something there. Maybe it's not something I can describe or something I could explain, but there was something there that made me care about him, that made me not forget him, that allowed me to talk to him.
But it seems like a common thread though, across the rest of the guys, because for some reason they can always invoke his spirit, his name.
Mhm.
It's like he was the bond, something about him that bond people together, even in the late years after Buffalo. It just seemed like, a common thread was Tennyson.
My my relationship with him got stronger after Buffalo. After we all became adults, married with children, adults, I found myself not talking to him frequently, but when we did talk, So
Yeah.
let's say we talk 2 times a year. It would be an hour conversation, easy. It would be enough there, enough substance
Yes.
that would carry a conversation and a genuine conversation. I cared about him, and he demonstrated he cared about me.
Yes.
His parents had a house about an hour north of where I live now. And when he came down to visit his parents and he told me he was there, I drove my family, my wife and my children, up to see him and his family.
Okay.
And his mother prepared a stellar Jamaican breakfast for us. The breakfast was so impressive. We
Yeah.
talk about it every now and then. My wife would say, "Who's that friend that we went to his mother's house for breakfast? I remember that." And we have pictures. I have pictures of my kids playing with his kids in the pool. There's a couple of pictures I have sitting next to him on like the back porch or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a good time. But anyway, the point I'm trying to illustrate is my friendship with Tennyson was closer when I left Buffalo. And we lived some years, and then we could catch up and talk to each other about what we've been through, what we're going through. Again, I didn't talk to him frequently, but I spoke to him like maybe twice a year. You're scrolling through your phone and you see a name. So, man, I ain't
Yeah.
talked to this guy in a while. Boom, you just calling him out the clear blue. It just so happens he's driving to work. He has 2 hours, and we can talk.
So we can go on for hours,
Yeah,
talking
I
about
was
things.
thinking the same shit. If you want to hear more, I could tell you
Yeah,
more,
we
but
can go on for hours, and we will get into those with later on in a different series where we'll have a segment, about Tennyson himself because he meant a lot to all of us. Mm, But I want to pivot just a little bit, and talk about some of your your career journey from leaving Buffalo, um, to moving back to Brooklyn after Buffalo, then on to your journey on to to where you are today. Do you want to just
get into it.
yeah, just a little bit,
All
just
right.
say where the different stages.
All right. So, as I said earlier, I left Buffalo thinking that I would be able to continue my education in New York at a 4-year school. And that didn't work out like I wanted to because I didn't adequately look into the plan. But I knew I had to leave Buffalo. I mean, I had enough. And then I was able to get a job 2 weeks after getting back to New York. But going from not making no money to making like 350 a week, that's huge. To now have 350 a week. But of course, that's not going to really get me far. But going from no income to a little income was a big
Yeah.
deal. And I decided to. I was working at night and going to school in the day. And again, that's where I met my wife. So we talk in 90, 91. Then I wound up stopping school. I wasn't working. 92, I was trying to weigh what to do with myself because in 92, I would have been about 24 years old. I really was looking at where I was in life and I didn't like it. And I was determined not to be in that same state when I turned 30. So, I've always said that you are today what is a result of what you did or did not do 5 years ago. So if you want to be something 5 years from now, you have to start working on it today.
Yes,
So that's
I believe in that.
that was my thought process. So I said, well, what can I do today so when I turn 30, I'm not a bum? And that's exactly how I looked at it. And I weighed a few options. I weighed going back to Buffalo. Somebody offered to put me up.
Okay.
A young lady I met at Caravana that I had a relationship with.
Okay.
And I decided not to go that route because I didn't want to be dependent upon nobody.
Yeah.
Because anytime she done with me, then I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Because I was dependent on her for a place to live. You understand? So
Agree.
I didn't want to put myself in that hole. I even considered crime. I considered selling drugs. Not that I was ever a part of that type of life,
Yeah.
but I knew people that was in that life. So I even considered that as a possibility.
And we can all say we're glad you didn't, right?
Yeah, and
Because
I'm glad I didn't too because
you probably
shit,
wouldn't have been here, having this conversation right
you
now.
know,
Or
we all think we're smarter than the police and we're smarter than everybody, but then you find yourself in a situation and you're done. So I'm glad I didn't go that route either.
and I'm glad Tita didn't have to come visit you. That's what I'm saying.
Anyway, I didn't give that strong consideration, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to paint a picture with how lost I was, how desperate I was, and just willing to consider anything. Don't leave nothing off the table. What are you gonna do with yourself? Because I didn't have enough skills to get a decent job,
Yeah.
and I didn't have the resources to go back to school, and I was just in a rut. We're talking '92. Crack is out there. You understand? I
So if
my
go ahead. I
no no
wanted to throw something because I was going to throw something in there.
yeah, go ahead.
I know you didn't mention it, right? You were at a point, where you didn't have a lot of option and stuff like that. Didn't you consider, and I'm not sure at which stage this was, didn't you consider the military at one point?
Yeah, that's about what I'm going to get into.
Okay.
So my brother was in the military. He was in the Navy,
Okay.
and for that year or so that he was in the Navy, it looked like he was doing all right. He had some prospects, but that didn't work out for him. That's another story. So I considered the military, and when I was in college, I was way anti-government, anti-military, and then to see my life turn, and now that becomes an option. That becomes something I'm really looking at. It really dawned on me, just how things came full circle.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe when you believe one thing, you let a few years go by, and now your beliefs are different. Because life has taught you some lessons,
Yeah.
beat you down a little bit, humbled you, took you off your pedestal. Because my first years in Buffalo, I was very optimistic. I was very happy. Things were better for me than they've ever been. And then all of a sudden, a year or two later, I drop out of school and I go to New York and I face reality. And you go to work and you lose that job. Now that income is gone. It's like I was humbled.
Yeah.
And I was definitely lost my confidence, was depressed, trying to figure out what I need to do, because you can't stay in this rut and
Yeah.
you ain't going to get better. But, things are not going to come to you. You have to go get them.
Yes.
So where to go, what to try to get, what's the goal?
Yes.
So I figured, okay, I'm gonna join the military full time, and after 4 or 5 years in the military, I should be in a position where I could have some options and make some decisions.
So you should be
So
able to have your rudder straight now,
yeah, I was
because
I was
that's
gonna
gonna help.
take a leap of faith.
Yes.
I was gonna join the military and put my life in their hands to mold me,
Yes.
and let me take advantage of whatever options I have before me.
Yes.
So that was November of '92, and I went through the process. I took the ASVAB test on a Friday night at Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn.
Yes.
The process required that you take a physical Saturday morning. So during my processing on Saturday morning, I was pulled out of the processing and I was accused of cheating on my test. It caused me to have to wait 6 months to try this again.
Okay.
So in May of '93, I took the test again and I made the same score that I made the first time. And I was allowed to finish processing. And instead of wanting to be a full-time Marine, I decided to be a reservist. And the difference that happened to me in those 6 months that I had to wait is that I solidified my relationship with my girlfriend at the time. And we became closer. And I decided not to go away for 5 years like I had initially planned. I look at that and it impacted my life because I'm still with that woman today and we had 3 kids together.
Yes.
And it was almost not going to happen if they didn't suspend my processing in November of '92.
Things happen for a
So
reason. Yeah.
it's experiences like that that help me to believe that there is a God there's divine intervention because I can't explain how things played out the way they did.
Yeah.
I was determined to go away, and through no fault of my own, I was accused of cheating on that test,
Yeah.
which, you know, my recruiter explained to me. He said, "Look, if the facilitators of the test felt you cheated on the test, why did they score the test?" It said the way they treat a cheater is they interrupt him during the test taking and ask him to leave.
Yeah.
Or when that test taker turn in the paper, they'll put the paper in the garbage. Why would you score the test of someone that you suspect of cheating?
Yeah. There was
So
something going on there.
all right, so the fact that they scored the test and gave me my grade told my recruiter something's not right. But he had no power to reverse it. So
Yeah.
he had to just follow the rules and told me, "Hey man, come back in 6 months and we'll do this again."
Yeah.
And my life still was in the same state 6 months later. So I applied again to go in the Marines. But the difference was that me and my girlfriend got closer.
Yeah.
And I decided to make sure that she was going to be a part of my life. So I changed my plans not to go away for 5 years. Because had I done that, there's no telling where my life would have turned. Divine intervention. That's what I chalked that
Yeah.
up to.
No, no, and that I said before, sometimes the destination, right? It's those deviations that help you build those characters that you need building, right? Because most of us, a lot of us, don't get to our journey in a straight line, and those deviations are the ones that help us build character, make us because who we are today, make us stronger, make us see some of the things that are out there that are we're facing that we're waiting for us. So I totally understand that, and I get it. So after the military, right? So you did a couple different things, a couple different things. You did not go away for 5 years. You went through a certain process, and you did it for a certain period of time,
1 year.
um, for 1 year. Were you were you in Florida then, or you were still in?
Boot camp was in South Carolina,
Okay,
Harris Island. That was 13 weeks. I think I went in July 20th and graduated October 15th of 1993. And one thing I remember about when I graduated boot camp is a couple of the recruits that I had met. They're from the Bronx. You get like 10 days liberty after boot camp, like a vacation or whatever time off. And they had a ride back to New York, and I didn't. I didn't know how I was getting back to New York. And because
sorry, quick thing. There is just all of a sudden starting to be some noise on your voice. I'm not sure what it is, but we'll continue. I just wanted to put that there. I don't know if it's
okay,
you changed something or whatever, but yeah, continue. I'm sorry.
yeah, that's all right. I might have been hitting my desk or my leg. That's probably what it was. I was rocking my leg back and forth, hitting the
No,
desk.
it's more of a frying sound from the
All
microphone.
right, somebody's washing dishes then, or some shit like that.
Listen, listen. This is real life, all right? We're not in a we're not in a studio where we have soundproof and stuff like that. So this is, hey, this is real life.
Yeah,
This is how things work out. So
all
that's
right.
fine.
Okay, I hear it now. You're making me conscious of it. And so I got a ride back to New York with my two new friends,
Yeah.
and they played Wu-Tang Clan and they played like Biggie Smalls on the trip back to New York. 'Cause we drove back to Brooklyn. They went to the Bronx. I went back to Brooklyn. But the trip back to New York, that's one thing I remember about coming out of boot camp. Some of the music that was released that summer was brand new to me. Wu Tang Clan and Biggie Smalls in the fall of '93. So after that, I spent 1 month in North Carolina combat training. And then I spent 8 months of electronic school in Nine Palms, California.
Okay. Okay. So I know we're coming close to our the end of our session, but I just want to say, is really, really good, to hear your stories. It's good to see that you can look back and share some of the, the things that you have gone through, the things that actually make you who you are today. The things that we call character building, the relationship with, with friends, the bond you have with family, the things that make you up. I definitely appreciate you, diving into those type of things and sharing with me and sharing with everybody who will see this, right?
Okay.
It is really appreciative. I guess the question I want to ask is, you've your kids, the family, and everything like that. For you, you're still in the position you are, the job, the career, and stuff like that. Are there anything else on the horizon? Anything like, if I say, what next?
Well, what's next for me is to maintain. I had some significant changes in my life in the last 2 or 3 years. The job that I have now, I was just promoted to this position in
Congratulations.
in January. Thank you. And it's a position that represents the highest that I can go at the job that I'm at now. So that's one thing. The other thing is that this is a goal I had set for myself 8 years ago. I started working for this company. I work for the post office,
Okay.
but I don't handle mail. I work in like,
Administrative service kind of
I
thing.
can, yeah, I work dealing with EEO complaints. So 10 years ago when I started working in this office, it was a temporary position, which, so I'm a contract employee
Hmm.
and my position, like the contract restarts every year.
Okay.
So on my anniversary, I have to take a mandatory break in service. So it's like I get fired, but then I get rehired. That's the equivalent, and that's the nature of my job. Now, I work for a year, I
Yeah.
take a break, and then and as long as I'm doing a good job, I'm invited back for another year.
How long is the break though? You said you take a break.
Three days.
3 days. Okay.
3 days. So it's a mandatory break for 3 days. 10 years ago, when I started working in this office, I was just working the job because it was a job. And then after like 2 years of being there, I sort of mapped out where I wanted to end up.
Yeah.
And it took 8 years to get, to where I am, but it's what I've been working for. So
Yeah.
to get it, is really fulfilling to me. It's like I didn't waste my time, I didn't waste my efforts. I had faith and I persevered, and now I'm being rewarded.
Yeah.
And as long as some other forces out there, which I won't even mention, as long as they don't mess up the works, I'm good.
Yes. I
I'm
hear you.
good
I
because
hear
my destiny is in my hands, and I've established myself with these people that I work for, and my reputation is intact.
speaks for itself.
I'm 58 years old. I'm not looking to start all over again nowhere. So if something negative was to happen, it would really be devastating.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to keep faithful that I've come this far. You don't bring me this far to drop me off. You understand?
I
So
hear you. I hear you.
I'm going to keep the faith that I'm good and just be optimistic like I've always been.
I mean, that's
So as far as what I have going forward, it's the job that I just got.
and family,
It's family. I have
grand, grand,
grandkids. I
grandkid.
got grandkids.
Let's not forget to mention that
Yeah,
grandkid,
I was getting to that. Got two grandchildren.
grandpa.
It's really three. It's really four. That's a complicated answer. No, how I mean it's really five.
Mm.
And the reason why it's five is because I have a daughter outside of my family. As a daughter that I came to know about recently, maybe like 5 years ago.
I hear you.
Maybe a little bit longer than 5 years, maybe like 8 years ago. And I don't deny her.
Yeah.
And she has two children.
Okay.
So I would be wrong if I didn't remember them and say, those are my grandchildren.
I hear you. Yeah, and definitely you don't wanna, forget about them at all.
But that's a subject, that's another story for another conversation, which I'll
And
be willing to share
yeah,
when that time comes.
we'll talk about those at another time if time permits and stuff like that.
And then the young lady that my son is with, I want to say that's his wife, but I don't think they're officially married. But he's living that life. He has two children with her, and she has a daughter
Okay.
before my son. So I include her as a
Yes.
grandchild as
I,
well.
I hear you.
So,
Yes.
2, 3, 5. That's the answer. How many grandchildren you got? 2, 3, 5.
Officially, you have 5 grandkids, so,
Yeah.
let's leave it that way, and it's alright, so, yeah, again, this was really, a good conversation, a great conversation because we went down memory lanes, we came back, we talk about, different things, family, friends, our journey basically, so,
Did you learn anything about me?
Frank, I'm always learning about you, and I'm glad, Dave is not on here because I would probably learn some more.
You'd see another side of me?
I would see another side of you, so I'm glad we were able to calmly get through this one because
Yeah,
Dave
man.
is on here, we would be, you probably would break out your Jamaican accent and start, going
Man,
off,
I would not let up.
so again, I really, really appreciate, you spending the time, you know, just sharing with us, all the things that we need to well we want to know about you, and it's been a captivating discussion, so again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. This was actually a breaking news. I wanted to say with Tom Brokaw because I was about to go somewhere and I got the call saying I'm available now, and I'm like, Frank, you were the one who told me, you know I don't know when I'm gonna be available, so
And,
getting that
and what el-
getting that text, I really had to
what
say,
else did I say? I
you know,
say I'll know when I'm available at the last
at
minute.
the last minute,
That's when
and
I know I'm
you were
available.
true to that. You were true to
Yeah.
that, because, I was about to go outside and do some lawn work, and then, I said to the wife, "I'm about to do this," and I was like, "Oops, I gotta change. I just got this message that this
Uh-huh.
person I've been trying to get can't get him."
Right. Yeah.
So again, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for making the time.
Thank you for
I really
doing it.
appreciate it.
I look forward to seeing your interview because I need to learn some things about you.
You will hear some things about me that you may not have known, but we'll find out who will be doing that discussion. I have no idea yet,
Okay.
so we'll figure out who will, and then we'll share that. But until I get through the rest of the guys, mine's probably
Uh-huh.
going to be the last or something like that. But
Uh-huh.
if somebody decide they want to come up and do it sooner, I'm good with that too. I'll sit on the other side of the microphone. I don't mind that. So who knows? Chev might pick up the mantle and do it. Who said,
Okay.
Uki might do it. I don't know. You may do it. It may be a team thing. Who knows? Right.
Right.
So I'm available whenever time somebody say they want to pick it up. So,
Okay.
but thanks again. Thanks again. I really appreciate spending the time with you and stuff like that.
All right, man. Same here.
All right. So
Go, go, still go. I never been so no, no, still go.